Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University School of Tourism and Hospitality Service Management, SOTHSM, Master of Tourism and Travel Management, MTTM, Semester 2, MTTM-7 Managing Sales and Promotion in Tourism, Unit 4 Selling Skills, for Point 0 Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to understand how to write effective sales letters, define what is presentation, and describe the types of sale presentations. Describe the structure of a presentation. Identify in detail each of the variables affecting an effective presentation strategy. Elaborate how to develop appropriate presentation skills. Define negotiation. Understand and explain different steps of negotiation, and describe the various skills required for each step and make use of negotiation skills in the selling process. 4.1 Introduction. In this unit, you will read about the different selling skills comprising of communication, presentation, and negotiation. The word communication is based on the Latin word meaning common. Thus, the term communication has come to mean sharing something of common use. In sales and marketing, communication is very important since the objective here is to communicate and inform the customers about the products/services and their nature. With growing competition in the marketplace, as well as the customers becoming better informed and more choosy, it is imperative now that marketing communications of the right kind are made to the right kind of target buyers. The communications can be oral or written, direct or indirect, and the process includes presentation, negotiation, etc. Presentation is an important part of selling process. You can have excellent content with good presentation technique and win the business. You can have good content with excellent presentation technique and win. But you may not have ever heard of poor presentation skills and good or excellent contents winning anything. Poor presentations are consistent losers, irrespective of the purpose or the business for which a presentation is made. An oral presentation is an important part of the business routine, and each one has to deal with the challenges of making a successful presentation. Negotiation is a fact of life. It is the basic means of getting what you want from others. It is a two-way communication process designed to reach an agreement when the two sides have some interests that are shared and others that are opposed. Negotiation is a demanding activity, and the best way to learn is to practice it with seasoned negotiators and get a personal feedback. The primary objective of every negotiation is goal achievement. Both the sides involved in negotiation will have their own goals. In this unit, we will first discuss about communication skills used in the selling process. We will talk about presentations and draw some lessons from winning presentations and some from losers to help you plan your business presentation successfully. Finally, we will talk about negotiation, the process of negotiation, and how to effectively complete a negotiation. 4.2 Communication skills. Communication, simply speaking, is sharing of information between two parties. Selling requires the salesperson to effectively communicate with the customer about the type, nature, and use of a product or service in question. Communication is effective or complete when the receiver understands in the same sense what the sender wished to communicate. The various elements in a typical communication are source. The source of communication contributes to the effectiveness of the message. The target. The communication will be effective if the target of communication is receptive. Message. The message of communication can usually be 0.F3 types. Information, a feeling or request for an action. Media. The media used in communication can be classified in several ways. Media can be verbal or nonverbal. A verbal medium can either be in written or oral form, and either in a face-to-face or distant situation. Letters, internet, telephones, etc. are the distance media. Proper communication skills are required for sales and marketing, since mutually satisfying. Exchange is the ultimate goal or promotion for marketing communication or in sales function. We use a variety of communication media, both written and oral. We can differentiate between written and oral communication as look at the screen. After noticing the difference between oral presentation and written report, you should be clear that an oral presentation is just not reading prepared text. Rather, H is an interactive situation with the audience where your nonverbal behavior also matters. The challenge is in putting across your message in a simple and short form, which your audience can comprehend and retain. You can also use body language to influence clarity. You will read about body language during sales presentation later in this unit. In communication, it is possible for you to choose your medium of communication, i.e., whether you would like written or oral communication. You write when you or the reader wants a record of the communication. You don't need an answer, but are simply supplying information. The receiver is preoccupied with other pressing matters. This information is complicated or detailed, and cost of telephoning is excessive. You talk when you want to encourage discussion, need a quick response, want to foster a personal relationship, want to build group rapport, and are dealing with a personal or sensitive matter. You have read about communication process and interpersonal relationships in MTML. You must remember that for any form of communication to move forward towards a successful conclusion, it is necessary to take feedback. The feedback can be in the form of feedback forms or oral feedback or the audience's body language. You can also judge your audience involvement by the type of questions asked or not asked by them. As a manager, you must ensure that your salespersons have the necessary communication skills along with sufficient product/service knowledge. 4.3 Written communication. A good sales manager has to have effective written communication skills. Very often you are required to write to your customers, besides communicating within the organization. The purpose of writing is to communicate a thought, an idea, a feeling, or fact. The more concrete and concise these elements in a communication, the more easy it is for a reader to respond to your communication. Also make sure that when you are writing, you don't miss out on some essential detail. For example, you are informing your key customers about a new tour package. But if you forget to mention the price or the uniqueness of the package, the entire communication can turn into a wasteful exercise. Let us discuss some of the key features in this regard. 1. Effective letter writing. Whenever writing to your customers, be as specific as possible, giving all the pertinent information as accurately as possible. Keep only the required information in your letter. Customers hardly have any spare time these days to go through unnecessary information. As a guideline, you can divide your letter into 3 parts. The basic pattern of a routine or good news letter is write most important points first, give supporting details, and end with a goodwill statement. Let us take an example of structuring a letter. Poor thank you for your booking. We at Top Hotels are happy to do business with companies such as yours and look forward to future bookings. Better booking confirmed. We await arrival guests. Thanks. Often the first sentence of a letter or a memo is weakened by an unneeded opening phrase, such as, one would like to inform you, this is to tell you, etc. For most business correspondence, avoid such opening and start right with the main point. On some occasions, it may be useful to refer to the previous correspondence. You ought to be precise and to the point, particularly when corresponding through ear nail or fax. 2. Structuring refusals or bad news correspondence. It is always difficult to say no, especially in writing. You can use any one of the 2 approaches, the direct approach or the indirect approach. A. The direct approach. If you know the receiver well, or when the bad news is expected and not very important, say, informing a colleague that your report will be completed later than scheduled, or telling your boss the details of a known problem. When using this approach, it is suggested that you should state the bad news simply and directly, give the reasons, close with a goodwill statement, and never give false hopes. Let us take an example of structuring a bad news correspondence using the direct approach. Regrets. Seats on this sector are unavailable till 30th. July in all airlines. Should we book 1st August? Please. Intimate. B. The indirect approach. In this approach, it is suggested that you should begin with a neutral opening statement. Give reason or circumstances leading to bad news. State the bad news in as positive terms as possible. Give a helpful suggestion or alternative. And close with a goodwill statement. Let us take an example of letter using indirect approach to turn down a request over email. We accept table reservations up to 6 p.m. How nice it would have been to receive your call by then and book your dinner table. However, a table is available in the Chinese restaurant. Please confirm. In the above letter, an indirect polite no is there, but it also carries a message that we don't want to lose you as a customer, and an option is provided. A good sales approach definitely involves the application of the basic principles of communication, along with the responsibility of establishing trust and belief with your prospects. All sales communications should resist the use of hard selling approach, as it's neither creditable nor useful. All sales communications must convince the prospect that their purchase will meet their needs better than the rest, and he or she should get a good value for money in your brand. In other words, the seller should present the product or service in terms of what it will do for the buyer. If, as a seller, you think your brand has nothing different to offer, you still have to make your sales message convincing. It is, therefore, important to identify such distinctive features, which in communication we call as central selling points. In addition, there are other special characteristics of sales letters and sales materials. Some of these points are shown in Exhibit I. Firstly, the sales letter suggests how the receiver will benefit from the purchase. For example, as shown in Exhibit I, it is mentioned that the receiver would have a better experience if he or she takes up this tour package. Secondly, sales letters emphasize on the overall message by using specific forceful words and phrases. For example, in Exhibit I, words and expressions like unmatched, long experience, thrills, etc. are used. Thirdly, all sales letters use mechanical means of emphasizing on the contents. These mechanical means range from the use of capital letters, underlining specific lines or parts of line, use of color in the text if it is a printed letter, specific arrangement/placement to box item, etc. For example, in the letter shown in Exhibit I, a few things are written in bold and in capitals. Exhibit L, Dreams Travel and Tour Company. Dear Mr./Ms., we would like to introduce ourselves as a premier travel and tour company in India, specializing in customized tour packages. As you know, traveling helps in broadening our minds, visiting new places, meeting new people, and experiencing new culture and traditions help in an individual's mental growth and development. A change in daily routine is very essential for one's energy level. So, at Dreams Travel and Tour, we help you to enjoy life at a leisurely pace. We help you to travel at your pace and at your whim. As a member of LATA, Lotto, PATA, and a recognized agency by Ministry of Tourism, we believe in providing the best of services at your time, convenience, and leisure, something unmatched. Come to us with your dream tour and see us fulfill your dream. We at Dreams Travel and Tour help you fulfill dream with thrills. For further details about our company's various packages, see our website on the net. Yours friend at Dreams. Lastly, in general, all sales letters have an informal style of writing. You may observe it in Exhibit L also. For example, normally in our business letters, we invariably write sincerely in the signature block. But in the signature block of this letter, in place of sincerely, your friends at Dreams is written. 4.4 types of sales presentations. A presentation is a commitment by the presenter to help the audience to do something for solving a problem. An interesting thing to note is that in a presentation, commitments are made by the presenter and the audiences are making judgments simultaneously. the presenter advocates, and the audience evaluates to render a verdict. In terms of content and structure, presentations and speeches have a good deal in common with formal reports. Many of them are an oral version of the written document. Typically, all salespeople use one of the following types of sales presentations. 1. Canned presentation. Canned presentations are those presentations where text of the presentation is carefully worded, tested, and finally written down. While making a presentation, each salesperson is expected to memorize it and strictly follow the contents in the defined order. The specific advantages of this technique are that one can finish the presentation in a short time and still have a successful close. The other advantage of this method is that it requires lesser time in training the field sales personnel and is most commonly used in non-technical product selling. The disadvantage of such technique is that the prospect has limited participation. He or she might view it as a high-pressure selling and defer taking a purchase decision. 2. Planned presentation. It is no doubt carefully planned and organized, but still has a personal touch of the individual making presentation. In this method, the training department provides just a format, and the individual salesperson then writes explanations, descriptions, and illustrations. The advantage of this presentation method is that it appeals more conversational and less formal, as the salesperson is using his or her own wordings. As a result, in this presentation method, the prospect also gets involved, and the prospect's doubts and questions can be carefully handled. 3. Audiovisual presentation. For some presentations, the salespersons heavily depend on the audiovisual AV aids. These aids range from charts, slides, video films, prototypes, computer-based presentations to the use of actual product. In advertising industry and computer software industry, such presentation methods are used. In these presentations, the speaker or the salesperson takes the back seat and the prospect attention remains centered around the AV aids. Such aids are typically used not only to gain the attention, but in the absence of these aids, it might be difficult to explain or demonstrate the product or service. Websites on the internet, for example, can be termed as the most sophisticated of these presentations. Hotels and tour operators are now progressively using these methods. 4. Problem-solving presentation. This is a two-step presentation method. The first stage is to study the individual prospect's need, and the second is suggesting a proposition, thus helping the prospect to solve the problem. Such method is commonly used in the insurance sector, where the insurance agent asks the prospect about the requirements, and accordingly, he or she proposes a specific policy, its advantages and benefits. Selling of conference facilities is another example. Similar methods are also used in management consultancy assignments relating to all functions or high-tech customized products. Here, we must consider the fact that all types of presentations basically consist of 4 parts. 1. Opening or introduction. The introduction of a presentation decides whether you can catch your audience's attention and arouse their interest. The introduction should be brief, stating the purpose and build a focus for your presentation. 2. Body. The body of a presentation should center around a selected few important points. 3 to 4. Try not to deviate from these points and read the body language of your audiences. Know whether your audience has lost interest. For example, if your audience is yawning or looking everywhere but at you, then you have most certainly lost your audience interest. Audio and visual aids are can be used to provide clarification. In the presentations, try to infuse humor and share your experiences to ensure that the presentation does not become boring or monotonous. 3. Ending. A final summing up is done to further clarify the presentation points, but new ideas should not be introduced in this stage. Summing up must cover the specific actions to occur and who will be responsible for doing what. 4. Question and answer. A question and answer session facilitates interaction and gives a chance to clarify about your product or service and also emphasize on its benefits. Some Speakers answer questions during their presentation, while others prefer the questions to the very end of their presentation. Nevertheless, questions and answers are an integral part of any presentation. For Point 5 planning, the PLL, presentation strategy, having understood the various types of presentation methods being followed, let us now systematically discuss the presentation strategy and the skills required by the speaker. Developing a strategy for delivering an oral message is just as crucial as developing a strategy for a written message. You have to put information in an easily understandable form. For maximum impact, it is important that one must define the purpose, analyze the audience, construct or develop the message with due estimate of time and appropriate length. Decide on the most appropriate style and media for presentation. There are some important variables which one has to keep in mind to develop an appropriate strategy for a presentation. 1. Define the purpose. For any presentation, the purpose must be thought out clearly, and then it should be sharply focused. Often a speaker accomplishes more than one purpose simultaneously. The amount of audience interaction varies from presentation to presentation, depending on the speaker's purpose. The purpose of a presentation could vary from informing, persuading, exploring to changing behavior/attitude, etc. The specific purposes for presentation are to motivate. You do most of the talking, and the audience essentially plays a passive role. You control the content of the message, and the audience listens. Here the challenge is not in giving information, but giving it in a manner for response. Inform or analyze. A group of people meet to hear the oral equivalent of a written report. Then members of the audience offer comments or ask questions, persuade or collaborate. Most of the interaction occurs when you aim to persuade people to take particular action or to collaborate with them to solve a problem or reach decision. You generally begin to provide facts to increase the audience's understanding of the subject. You offer arguments in defense during discussion, and you invite the audience to express their needs. 2. Analyzing the audience. Your choice of a strategy for composition of your purpose must take into account all those who will be attending it. The nature of the audience affects your strategy for achieving your purpose. You should know your audience and size them up in advance. You must look for characteristics that will affect your speech, e.g., audience size, sex, age, education, and knowledge. More especially, consider the following in as much detail as possible. A. First, consider the size and composition of the audience. A small group may be drawn into a decision-making process. A homogeneous group benefits from a focused presentation. A diverse group requires a more generalized approach. So be sure of the size of the group you are going to address. B. Consider likely reactions to your speech or presentation. The reactions to your speech could be hostile, receptive, or indifferent. It is easy to talk to a receptive group. It is also possible to convert indifference into interest. It is quite challenging to convert hostility into support. But be clear whether the audience cares about the issues you will discuss and how much they already know about your subject. C. Finally, you need to take a cold, hard look at their relationship with you. Do they already know you? Do they respect your judgment? The answer to these points would help deciding the best way to organize your material. 3. Developing the message. A message should be carefully developed with a view to generating a desired response. It is, therefore, important that while developing messages, one should define the main idea, construct an outline, and estimate the appropriate length. A number of times, the speaker is required to carefully choose words, particularly while handling sensitive subjects. In such situations, if you lose control on what you speak, your message will not be understood in the right spirit. It is, therefore, important that we define the main idea and construct a concrete outline around the identified idea. Now, collect sufficient information which should be adequate for the available time you have to make the presentation. At times, you collect 11 whole lot of information, but you fail to put together in an appropriate order. There are specific guidelines available. to arrange the material in suitable order. It is suggested to follow the inverted pyramid structure. The suggestion is that you should start with the most important point and then go down to the least, or start with conclusion and go down to backup information, or start with a general statement and go down to specifics. Any one of these options would guide you in sequencing the information, although it appears simple, but actually it is not. One has to decide and compartmentalize information in various groups, sequence them, and then present. Having decided the sequencing of information for developing an appropriate message, the next step is how to deliver it. Knowing your abilities, time available for preparation, audience size, etc., would influence your presentation method. For determination of presentation method, you could decide upon any of the methods. 1. Extemporaneous presentation is that which is prepared in advance and delivered afresh. The exact wordings are figured out as the speaker goes along. It combines prior organization and spontaneity. The speaker prepares an outline, may write down at best full opening and closing sentences, and prepare visual aids to promote a set sequence of thoughts and contents. 2. Impromptu is that when you are given no time to think and organize. For example, you never know when your superior will ask you for a 2-minute update on your field experiences of the previous day. 3. Memorizing is a presentation which is learnt by heart. If a link is broken while speaking, the whole presentation gets affected. 4. Reading is yet another method. In PAP, or reading, it is said that every speaker looks at his or her notes for 35% of the time and at the audience for the remaining 65%. In business, this method is followed the least. 5. Speaking from notes. Speaking from notes is similar to the first method with a difference that the speaker has his or her points with explanations written down and he or she speaks from the notes. To prepare these notes, normally reference cards are used which the speaker can hold in one hand. There is no hard and fast rule suggesting what method should be used in which situation. As a speaker, it is up to you to decide which method is the best suited for you in the given situations. But you must practice it in advance before making a presentation. 5. Some guidelines. In an oral presentation, which is an interactive medium, you can choose from a wide range of audiovisual AV materials. Here, also you require careful planning. A number of times, a presentation gets killed because of overemphasis on AV material. Always keep in mind while selecting any AV material that to what extent the selected media would help supplementing or reinforcing your message. You can select audiovisual material out of a large variety, ranging from brochures, leaflets, slides, prototypes, actual product, audio tapes, video material, computer-based aids, etc. While preparing a presentation, it is suggested to follow the following guidelines. For selecting the best suited media, do not cram information if you have too much to say. Maybe you should write it out separately. Keep only relevant material, as irrelevancies create distractions and confusions. Organize and break up your material into small modules. Disorganization compels the audience to concentrate on finding the structure of a NER presentation rather than listening to you. Visualize your ideas as much as possible. Understanding, remembrance, and clarity are the highest in the picture form. Use as few words as possible. Use only those points which the audience can understand, and don't write complete sentences. Make the pictures and letters bright enough to be visible from a distance and to be read by all. Use a light color for background. Use dark or bright colors for pictures or letters to improve visibility. Make the sound material audible, pleasing in tone, varied, and synchronized with visuals. Finally, before the presentation, check particularly the audibility, visibility, and readability of your AV material, if possible, in the actual place of presentation. For point 6 presentation skills, all preparations on the structure and strategy of your presentation will have limited impact on your customers or audience if you don't have the right presentation skills. For example, it is very important that you should be able to have control on yourself. The moment you rise to speak, you convey some signals your audience, which might ultimately decide the success or failure of your presentation. For point 6.1 personal aspects, a logical step in preparing a presentation is to analyze yourself. You are an integral part of the message. You should seek following characteristics. 1. Sincerity is vital. Project an image of sincerity by being sincere to yourself, to your subject, and to your audience. 2. Thoroughness, i.e., giving the listeners all they need. 3. Confidence in yourself is important so as to gain your audience's confidence. You must earn the confidence of your audience, project the right image, and talk in a strong, clear voice. 4. Friendliness, i.e., help your communication effort by creating the right environment. Although these 4 points appear as 4 different things, they do relate to each other. For example, if you are sincere, you would do a thorough preparation for your presentation. If you are thorough, you would feel confident. And if you are confident, you would be more open and friendly with your prospects or audiences. Therefore, these personal aspects should be well taken care. For point 6.2, nonverbal behavior. In any presentation, nonverbal behavior also plays a major role to supplement your message. Let's take up some typical examples to identify the variable elements of nonverbal communication. Although it is not all that easy to suggest a definite set of do's about your body language. During presentations, however, one can easily identify some don'ts. If you carefully notice the 6 body language shown in figure I, you may realize that typically Rena speakers make some of these mistakes. Let us analyze each of the 6 situations in some detail. 1. Reader is a person who does not make eye contact with the audience and is only concerned about his or her material. Such speakers fail to establish any wavelength with the audience. Weakling is a speaker who does not know the utility of lectern, which in fact is a support for the speaker's materials and not the speaker himself or herself. 3. Gripper is a speaker who does not make any attempt to supplement the message. Rather, she is only bothered about the verbal part of the message. 4. Musician is a speaker who does not adapt the gestures to the contents of the presentation, but continuously keeps relaying these, which does not relate with the audience. The suggestion is that one should bring some variation in the gestures. 5. Ben Voyager is a speaker who overdoes the gestures. As a result, the presentation becomes more theatric. The suggestion is that in a typical business presentation, the hands should not go above the shoulder level. 4. Pacer is a speaker who is, although relaxed, but still not too sure about movements, postures, and gestures. The suggestion is that think beforehand about how to stand, where to move to, how often to move, etc. From the above illustrations, let us now refer to some common observations. As shown in Figure 4, you must have experienced yourself that if you are nervous, the gestures don't flow out of you, and you try to bring control to yourself. Here, the facial expression also reflects seriousness. If you are confident, your facial expressions correspond to the contents. Gestures are natural and illustrative, and you maintain a definite eye contact with your audience. You might have also seen in a presentation that people respond differently to questions. There are some who reflect dominant attitude through their facial expressions, position of hands, while others, with the same nonverbal behavior, communicate openness and euphuism. With the help of these illustrations, we have tried to explain to you that in any presentation, your body language is an integral part of your presentation. We have also seen that how one can plan the body language for the presentation. If you are able to incorporate only 20% of the above, you would still notice a marked improvement in your presentation skills. Therefore, each speaker must give due attention to his or her nonverbal behavior, the way they give attention to the verbal contents, how confident you appear through your voice, how effective you become through the use of your voice, How successful you emerge by speaking clearly and holding the attention of your audience. Are the issues related to the oral delivery? Every aspect of the oral delivery, i.e., rate, pitch, volume, vocal quality, etc., is important. Look at the screen. Figure 4. Nonverbal during interradians with audience. 1. Pitch. It is a highness or lowness of your voice. Voice too high or low can add to word. Value. A monotonous voice may drift the audience away from the speaker. 2. Rate. It relates to the number of words released per minute. The purpose is to synchronize speaking with listening pattern of the audience. The rate should also relate to the subject matter. Often you might have felt that if you speak a sentence at a higher rate, you can create a better impact. High volume. It relates to the loudness or softness of the voice, and by contrast, in volume 1, can give emphasis on the spoken words. For vocal quality, it is difficult to define it, but we come across so many words to describe voice quality. Some of these words which describe voice quality are throaty, loud, vibrant, dynamic, moving, weak, strong, harsh, shrill, effeminate, gentle, clear, flexible, vibrant, colorful, etc. 5. Pronunciation. It should be your constant endeavor to find out the right pronunciation of each word. You may not get any advantage for correct pronunciation, but you are certainly at a disadvantage when it is incorrect. You would be surprised to know how carefully your audience are observing your mistakes, and on every mistake they drift away from you. There are some suggestions to help you in enhancing your nonverbal communication while you speak to a group. These suggestions are: sincerely like your audience. Know your subject thoroughly in order to appear confident. Be well dressed, not overdressed. Look your listeners in the eye, not too long at anyone, and talk with them. Avoid excessive, meaningless gestures and nervous movements. Keep calm. Remain objective, no matter what the provocation, and speak clearly and pleasantly. Make sure that you can be easily heard. For point 7 principles of effective presentation, see Ron Hoff, a hardcore advertising professional, head of Ron Hoff & Associates, based on his presentations to the clients, has suggested some basic guidelines for effective presentation. Let's discuss these 8 real-life principles of presentation that make a measurable, meaningful difference in the success of your presentation. Rule and description. 1. In preparing your presentation, maybe you should start about halfway through. 2. Content is always the first requirement of any presentation. Once content breaks down, delivery is never far behind. 3. It's impossible to be too clear. 4. Keep in mind that your audience is going to remember about 1/4 of what you say. 5. Participation by your audience will help them remember you and your message, but handle with care. Participation can backfire. 6. Nervousness is not all bad, but it can become serious when your audience becomes more concerned about your nerves than your subject. 7. Eye contact is the strongest force in your favor during a live presentation. 8. People may lie, but body language never does. Source: Ron Hoff T. How to Make Your Next Presentation a Winner in Strategic Advertising Campaigns by Don E. Schultz, IINWA, Net Business Books, 1996. Let us discuss each one of these briefly. 1. Start halfway. In preparing your presentation, maybe you should start about halfway through. There isn't an audience in the world that hasn't said to itself, when is a presenter going to stop talking about his business and start about mine? So instead of opening remarks, why not structure your outline to begin with an issue of direct concern to my audience? The sooner you can stop being self-conscious and start being audience-conscious, the better your chances of winning a positive verdict. 2. Plan out content. Content is always the first requirement of any presentation. Once content breaks down, delivery is never far behind. If you don't know your subject, your voice is going to tighten. If you don't believe what you are saying, your gestures are going to be half-hearted. If you get a question that catches you unprepared, Your body language is going to answer for you. How much substance do you need in order to feel supremely confident about your next presentation? The answer is have in your head about 7 times as much information as you are likely to use in your presentation. Know your subject better than anybody in the room, and your delivery may not be magnificent, but it will carry conviction, and that's better than empty theatrics any day. 3. Clarity. It's impossible to be too clear. Many presentations are so muddled that members of the audience say to themselves, "What in the world is that person talking about?" Or, "What on earth am I doing here?" Here is a simple but effective exercise. Ask yourself, if we're going to put 15-word headline on my presentation, what would it say? Isolate the meat of what you want to communicate and make sure you say it clearly, prominently. Also ask yourself, what do I really want my audience to do as a result of this presentation? 4. Partial receptivity. Keep in mind that your audience is going to remember about 1/4 of what you say. A surprising number of presenters will assume that once a statement is made, the audience retains it. In reality, an average audience retains approximately 25% of a presentation if the verbal content is given visual reinforcement, slides, charts, videotapes. If the presenter is simply standing there, going through a manuscript, flooding the atmosphere with words, he or she will be likely to have 1/10 of the total message retained by the audience. So what do you do about it? Maybe you would like to tell them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them what you told them. Put your proposition up and keep referring to it. It is not that audiences have poor memories. It is simply that presenters assume that audience have perfect memories. 5. Encourage participation. Participation by your audience will help them remember you and your message, but handle with care, as participation can backfire also. You, the presenter, can ask your audience to do almost anything. Most audiences are surprisingly agreeable. They will do almost anything. Nonetheless, a few words of caution. Study your audience carefully before you get up to present. Look for the most animated people in your audience to be your participators. Participation by your audience can make your presentation unforgettable, but just make sure that it does not backfire. 6. Control nervousness. Nervousness is not all bad, but it can become serious when your audience becomes more concerned about your nerves and your subject. Nervousness is the number one problems of people who make important presentations in advertising or in any other business. But nervousness, sometimes known as stage fright, is not all bad. There are ways to deal with it, and some of them can actually work. 1. Take a brisk 2-minute walk. It can be around the block, through the halls, or anywhere you want to walk. Exercise of any kind breaks the strain that creates nervousness. 2. Look at yourself in a mirror and check your appearance. Nothing is out of place and you look like you want to look. That reduces anxiety. 3. Next, take 5 deep breaths. Deep breathing always calms the nervous system. Ask anybody who has hypertension about the results of deep breathing. 4. Tell yourself that your presentation has one goal only, to genuinely help the audience. That uncomplicates your mind and keeps the focus clear. 7. Eye contact. Eye contact is the strongest force in your favorite Duringa live presentation. When you make your next presentation, you will know whether you are making eye contact or not because you can see your audience. Here are 3 fundamentals on eye contact that will benefit your next presentation. 1. Don't set any specific length of time to maintain eye contact with one person. Stay only as long as it is comfortable for both people. 2. Eye contact should be broken by natural pauses and meaning dash between phrases or thoughts. Eye contact usually breaks most comfortably at punctuation points. 3. There's a big difference between staring at people and eye contact. Staring is intimidating, confrontational. Eye contact reduces the distance between people. It reaches out, asks for Understanding on a one-to-one basis. 8. Body language. People may lie, but body language never does. Body language, once you have learned how to read it, is going to tell you more than what your audience will say. You can rate people by their body language and use your ratings to apportion the amount of time you spend with each member of your audience. Obviously, you'll want to work a little harder with eye contact and participation techniques on the person who is scoring low on your body language scale. For point 8, selling and negotiating. Sales negotiation can be defined as a process for resolving conflict between two or more parties, where both or all modify their demands to achieve a mutually acceptable solution. You may note from this definition some of the following important points. Negotiation is a process of resolving conflicts, and if there are no conflicts, there is no need to negotiate. There's a need to resolve conflicts, more so with your customers. If we don't resolve conflicts, we may even lose them. Negotiation does not mean persuading the others to accept our offer. Rather, we should listen to others and their propositions. If possible, modify our standards, suggest/guide the others to modify their demand, and through negotiations we try to reach at a mutually acceptable compromise to solve a problem. Selling can be described as the process of identifying customers, then getting through to them and persuading them to act or accept our propositions. Whereas negotiating is a process of getting the best terms once the other side starts to act on their interest. One important point to keep in mind is that negotiation is not just stating a grievance or point of conflict. As you must have experienced, complaints at best can produce apologies, and at worst, they lead to arguments. In negotiation, what we really want is to suggest or encourage a proposal which will put things right and take the parties concerned to an acceptable solution. Negotiation is meant to lead to a solution or situation which is profitable or acceptable to both the parties concerned, like in the case of business negotiation for starting a new business or venture between two organizations or persons. Here, it's a process of selling each other's organization's views and goals, or the selling of business ideas. Negotiation, as seen in the above situation, is a process of putting forward suggestions to arrive at a mutually satisfying and/or profitable situation. In the selling situations, a negotiation opportunity arises whenever the buyer and the seller differ on terms on sale, be it price, discounts, terms, or place of delivery. For point 9, the negotiation continuum and steps. Negotiation involves movement of both the parties. Thus, in a negotiation, we must have somewhere to move from and somewhere to move to. We move from our ideal position to a settlement point that is acceptable to both parties. Our opponent also does exactly the same. It is the relative bargaining strength and skill of the negotiators that decides the position of this settlement point. Look at the screen. This sample in Figure S is static. Negotiation in reality, however, is a dynamic process. As the negotiation proceeds, both the sides have to review, modify their limits. If you look at the above continuum in the context of sales process, as a salesperson, your ideal position is to sell your product at a maximum benefit, while from the customer's angle, the ideal position might be to get all the benefits at a much lower price. As the sales process moves, both of you are likely to move from ideal positions and reach a mutually agreeable state if the transaction has to take place. The negotiating process for understanding purpose is broken down into the steps, see Figure 6, through which the negotiations will go if an agreement is to be reached. However, please keep in mind that this is not a rigid order, and the time and attention devoted to different steps varies. Look at the screen. However, it is essential for you to appreciate the importance of each stage, irrespective of the sequence in which they may take place. Table I summaries each of these studies. Table I, different steps of negotiation. Step and what you should do. 1. Preparing. Have you decided your objectives? Have you prioritized them? Are they realistic? What are your opponent's objectives? Do you have information regarding buyer attitudes, personalities, assumptions, etc.? Is your strategy simple and flexible? In a group negotiation, have 2. Discussion. Always try to avoid interrupting, talking to much, using sarcasm and threats. Practice listening and summarizing. 3. Signaling. Is your signal generating some movement? What signals have you made? If your signals have been ignored, have you tried rewording them? Are you listening attentively for your opponent's signals? For proposing, what is the language you're using to convey your proposal? Have you itemized your proposal? While receiving a proposal, ensure that you do not interrupt it. 5. Offer. Before making an offer, review your opponents and your own objectives. How can your offer meet all/some of your opponent's inhibitions/objectives? Have you considered all the possible variables in your offer? 6. Bargaining. Everything must be conditional. Decide what you require in exchange for your concessions. Keep all unsettled issues linked. 7. Closing. And agreeing to decide where you intend to stop trading. What type of close are you going to use? Always list the agreement in detail. If the agreement is oral, always send a written note to your opponent as soon as possible after the meeting. 1. Prepare. What you do or don't before you arrive at the negotiating table will become evident when you get to negotiations. If you are not fully prepared, you can only react to events. You cannot lead them. In the preparation phase, you define what needs to be achieved and also decide how it will be achieved. As a negotiator, you must know what you want in the short term and what in the long term. You must be aware of your opponent's expectations and environment. For easy understanding, we can subdivide preparation under a number of key headings: objectives, information, concession, strategy, and tasks. A. Objectives. The first priority in preparation is to decide your objectives as dash. Everything else will follow this. Once you decide your objectives, you must assign relative priorities and question how realistic they are. If your objectives are clearly unattainable, you are not likely to gain anything from negotiation. Once you decide your objectives, these also become your criteria for measuring whether the negotiation has been a success or a failure. The first step in deciding objectives is to make a list of all your objectives. The objectives set in any negotiation are only fixed at a given moment of time. Circumstances, people, information, tourist season, and so many other factors can alter the objectives and their ranking. After you have listed down all the objectives, you can classify them into 3 categories: like to get, intend to get, and are must get. Relating this step to the sales process is very important for a sales manager/person, for then only you decide your call objectives before you meet the customer and categorize them. For example, you're the sales representative of a hotel, which has 350 rooms inclusive of all room types such as single, double, deluxe, suite, etc., and daily during the off-season from a particular travel agency. You may like to get 30 rooms at 25% profit margin. Intend to get 25 rooms at 20% profit margin. Must get 20 rooms at 17% profit margin. B. Information. To establish and prioritize your objectives realistically, considerable amount of information is required. The person with the best information in a negotiation carries a lot of power. After you collect all the information, decide which information to use and which not to use. After deciding your sales objective, the more information you can gather about your customer in terms of his or her personality, likes and dislikes, past usage pattern, etc., the easier will be for you to plan a strategy to deal with him or her. In case of dealing with an organization, it is better to know the organization's nature of business partners, and likely expectation from your company, and so on. C. Strategy. Strategy as a separate step will be discussed if a tailor in this unit. However, you must keep in mind that in preparation phase, your strategy will need to be mapped out. Thus, the framework or game plan you need to follow to achieve your objectives must be clear. Always ensure that your strategy is not too inflexible. It should be able to respond to developments within the negotiation. Thus, at any stage of negotiation, if you feel that the strategy is not working, you must be able to modify it. D. Tasks. In the day-to-day minor negotiations, we act as an individual rather than as a member of a team. However, in more important negotiations, both the groups involved are likely to have more than one member. In such situations where the group has more than one member, it becomes very essential that each member's role and the tasks that he or she has to do are clearly defined and explained. Many times when you're calling a major customer, you may visit him or her as a team from your company. At such meetings, it is important that everyone in your team knows what 2. Discussion or arguing. The second step in the process of negotiation is a discussion or arguing. When the parties involved in negotiation first meet each other, they are aware of the conflict of issues between them. In the instance where the parties have not met each other before this, they are most wary of each other. Thus, during the opening phase of negotiation, the atmosphere tends to be very tense. The discussion step is a major opportunity as you can gain all kind of information regarding the other party's behavior, intentions, and objectives. To gather more and more useful information about your opponent. However, you must avoid the habit of interrupting your opponent. As is normally seen when emotions read charged up, most of us make certain reads, not necessarily intending to carry them out. The most natural reaction to a threat from either side is a counter threat from the other party. In such a situation, during a negotiation, both the parties may end up with mutual exchange of sanctions. Thus, it becomes very critical that as a party involved, in negotiation, you depict constructive behavior. But the problem is how to show constructive behavior. The most important thing here is to listen more than you talk. Your positive listening must be supported and followed by positive talking behavior. The technique for doing this is to ask open questions which will encourage your opponent to explain and elaborate his or her views and ideas. When the discussions are in progress, one of the factors that will determine the outcome is how well you can send signals. Both the parties involved need to move from their ideal state to mutually acceptable state. The parties involved in the negotiations use sanctions and incentives to ensure movement towards their ideal state. 3. Signaling behavior. When you are involved in negotiations, the way to handle concessions with confidence is to develop skills in signaling behavior. A good negotiator always tests how strong is his or her opponent's apparent stonewall position. This is the same situation which any salesperson recognizes when he or she is facing objections from the customers. The first thing that a good salesperson does in such a situation is to test whether the objection is real or false. So he or she will ask the customer, if I was able to overcome this problem, would you be prepared to buy? For a real objection, the customer's answer to above question is yes. With the help of signals, the parties involved in negotiations indicate their willingness to negotiate. 1. What is a signal? The dictionary defines signal as a message. For any message to convey the meaning, it has to be interpreted correctly by the receiver. Signals are qualifications placed on a statement of a position. Thus, instead of saying, I will never agree to your demands, you may say, in the present form, your demands are unacceptable to me. A signal is expected to lead to movement. 2. How to signal? For signals to convey message effectively, it is essential that the parties involved in the negotiations are listening to each other. What normally happens is that as both the parties are focusing on their issues, many a times they will miss the signals and prolong the argument. If you are not listening to what your opponent is saying and how he or she is saying it, you will inevitably miss the signals. However, there are many situations during negotiation when you may want to consciously miss a signal. Consciously missing a signal requires a different skill. During a deadlock, If you are willing to negotiate a solution, you can try to break the argument by signaling or responding positively to signals sent by your opponent. Remember, the method to signal is by adding qualifications to your statements. For example, it is not a normal practice. Over here, to give credit, everything you are suggesting cannot be accepted, etc. 3. What to do when your opponent ignores a signal? If there is no response to your signals from your opponent, you must analyze first whether he or she has missed a signal, or is he or she intentionally ignoring the signal. If your opponent has missed a signal, you can either repeat it verbatim or in a modified form. Everything you are suggesting cannot be accepted in its current form can be repeated as you cannot expect us to accept everything you are suggesting in its current form. After having tried a signal, repeat it in different forms, and on receiving a response to any one of the signals from your opponent, you must decide whether you want to move out of discussion or, more importantly, whether negotiations are possible in current circumstances. For proposing, discussions, opinions, and prejudices cannot be negotiated. Only proposals can. When an argument is prolonged, the way out is by a signal which leads to a proposal. In the context of negotiation, a proposal is an offer which establishes a realistic opening position. When you are presenting an initial proposal, you would most likely state your ideal position, and your language will affect the firmness of your position. I had expected much better service. When you present a secondary proposal, you are trying to initiate a move forward to common ground. Thus, the language used for secondary proposals in most cases is tentative. I may look into the possibility of considering this. 1. How to present a proposal. The best way to present a proposal is to keep it separate from reasoning and justification. The reasoning must be reserved for only those cases where it is absolutely necessary. The party that puts the proposal first usually gains an upper position in the negotiation, as after having put the proposal, it can always seek a response. Is my proposal acceptable? 2. How to receive a proposal. To effectively receive a proposal, you must curb two common behavior patterns: interrupting and instant rejection. When you interrupt a proposal, you are likely to miss something which was yet to be proposed, as very often experienced negotiators will tag a concession at the end of a proposal. The other important behavior to control is its instant rejection, even when the opponent's proposal is absolutely unacceptable to you. Treat the proposal with some respect. Listen carefully to the complete proposal, and then ask questions to clarify the points that may not be clear to you. If you are well prepared, then reply to the proposal. And in case you need some time to finalize, ask for an adjournment. The main purpose of an adjournment is to review and assess progress against the set objectives. The actual number and frequency of adjournments depends upon the practice of negotiators involved. The most useful skill in handling proposals and counterproposals is the summarizing skill. Regular summarizing of issues keeps both the parties concentrated to issues. 5. Packaging the offer. Offer moves the negotiations into the bargaining arena, but before the bargaining begins, 1. Should package the offer suitably. What is an offer? In the context of negotiations, an offer is considered an activity in response to the opening moves of a negotiation. When you present an offer, you present the variables in a form which more clearly match the other party's interests and inhibitions. For example, a sales executive of a hotel to the travel agent: I will give 10% extra discount on the special rate. Before presenting the offer, you must think carefully and creatively about all the possible variables. 6. Bargaining. Bargaining is about exchange. You give up something and gain something. This is the most intense phase of negotiation. The single most important rule of bargaining is to make all propositions and concessions conditional. Thus, while bargaining, you give away nothing, absolutely nothing for free. You always use the big if. If you agree to X, I will agree to Y. Another point to keep in mind is to put your bargaining proposals as statements and not as Questions if you inform the discount and promise to deliver in 7 days. Then IO will process the order. While during the proposal step, you make tentative offers. YJI consider, I will look into, etc. In the bargaining step, you firm up your proposals and become more positive. If you do X, I will, doi. Very often in negotiation, a party will present a list of demands, objections, requirements, etc., followed by the logical suggestion that each item is dealt with one at a time. If other party presents such an idea, don't agree to such a demand. Always try to ensure that you keep all the issues and dispute linked. If you agree to negotiate item by item, the other party has good chances of squeezing you. However, this depends on the situation. 7. Closing and agreeing. The purpose of closing is to lead both the parties to a final agreement. Thus, closing must be credible. Your closing package must meet enough of your opponent's needs to be acceptable. 2 common types of closes used during negotiations are concession close and summary close. 1. Concession close. When you use a concession close, you terminate the bargaining step by offering a concession to secure agreement. For example, a sales executive to the travel agency executive looking after the conference. Delegation. We'll provide rooms on room plus breakfast basis at the rates you ask for. And we will also provide the morning tea and snacks during the conference daily, free of cost, but only for this delegation. 2. Summary close. Summary close terminates a bargaining step by summarizing everything that has been agreed up till then, highlighting the concessions that the customers have secured from your side, and emphasizing the benefits of agreeing to what is on the table. For example, sales executive to the travel agency executive looking after the conference. Delegation. The rates are the best you can get. As you know, we are providing rooms at the rate you ask for, and that 2 on room plus breakfast basis. Plus, we will also provide morning tea and snacks during the conference, free of cost. Plus, we are also providing space, table, phone, lines, and other facilities, along with tea and lunch for your team of 2 people stationed in our hotel for handling this delegation. And we will see that check-in and check-out takes the least possible time of your delegation. Agreeing is the last step towards which both the parties have been working. The purpose of closing is to secure agreement to what is on offer. It is of utmost importance that both or all the parties involved rate absolutely clear on what they have agreed to before they leave the table. 8. Deadlock. We have seen all the steps of the negotiation process. During any of the steps, negotiations could enter deadlock. A deadlock stops the negotiation process. Deadlock has a price. It's most obvious. Price is the fact that the time spent in trying to negotiate a deal becomes a dead loss to the organization if the deadlock is irresolvable. Deadlocks occur in many negotiations despite the best efforts of the negotiators. Some deadlocks are temporary. Others can be permanent. The way to handle a deadlock is to keep your emotions, prejudices out of the issue, and work towards finding some common objectives. Your basic intention should be to get negotiation process moving again so as to enable a solution acceptable to both parties. For 0.10 in IGNOU strategies, during the negotiation process, as the discussion moves on, you react to the other parties' comments in various ways. However, 3 natural reactions that are commonly observed in most people are: 1. Strike back. In this strategy, you respond to your customer in the same tone and language as he or she is doing to you. Occasionally striking back will show your perspective that you can also play the same game and will make him or her stop. But more often, this strategy will land you in a futile and costly confrontation. 2. Given. Many times your customer may succeed in making you feel so uncomfortable with the negotiations that you give in just to be done with it. Giving in results in an unsatisfactory outcome, especially for you. Giving in also gives you a reputation for weakness that your opponent and others may try to exploit in the future. 3. Break off. At times, the negotiation process can come to such a stage that avoidance is a perfectly appropriate strategy. Sometimes it is better to end a business relationship if continuing means being taken advantage of or getting into fights again and again, but the costs of a break-off are high. Breaking off is frequently a hasty reaction that you come to regret later. The negotiation requires you to be a very good communicator. As stated earlier, the objective of negotiating should be a win-win solution for both the parties. This requires that you show empathy with the other person. If we consider empathy an overall projection, i.e., how you come across to other by your tone, language, etc., we can have 4 kinds of communications. Type 1 high-pressure communicator. He or she is the kind of person who is over-aggressive and insensitive to other person's feelings. He or she feel that by sheer pressure, he or she can win over the argument. In fact, mostly what happens is that as he or she is very low empathy, it becomes self-defeating and switches off the other persons who are taking part in negotiation. Type 2 little interest communicator. He or she is the kind of person who has little interest in the other person and surprisingly in his or her own ideas. His or her general attitude in the process is take it or leave it. It often appears that mentally he or she has no interest in the process of negotiation. Thus, a lack of commitment to the whole process tends to just run the process. Type 3 weak communicator. He or she is the kind of person who is oversensitive to the other person's needs and comes over as essentially nice. He or she can take the side of the other person so much that on occasion that there is no persuasion and thus no commitment is achieved. Type 4, the ideal/assertive communicator. He or she is the kind of person who has an understanding of the other person's ideas, but is also firm about his or her ideas. He or she produces agreement and commitment to the satisfaction of both the sides. For point 1.1 principles of sales negotiations. Lastly, let us summarize the principles of sales negotiation. 1. 2. Negotiation is about bargaining to reach a mutually agreeable outcome. Thus, your endeavor should be a win-win outcome for both parties. Never neglect your preparation, and you must have a clear plan. It is also advisable that you select the right starting point. 3. All the participants in the negotiation must regard each other as equals, as mutual respect is essential to both the conduct and outcome of the negotiation. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Always keep in mind that negotiation is not a debate, but a discussion. Therefore, each person must fight his or her corner without trying to overdominate or show one. Upmanship, patience is a key characteristic of a good negotiator. Thus, take your time and do not rush into decision-making. Delay is much better than a poor outcome. Empathy is another vital characteristic. Therefore, see things from others' point of view, objectively. State clearly your objectives and take a feedback as to whether the other person has clearly understood your objective or not. Avoid confrontation and avoid getting into a corner you cannot get out of. When you have to disagree, do it carefully. When you have to make concessions, make them one at a time. Unwillingly, aim high and settle as high as possible. Know when to drop the whole thing rather than agree to a totally inappropriate deal. 2. Maintain your stamina. 11. Never underestimate people. 12. And positively, neither party will get exactly what they want, but the deal should be agreeable. For point 1.2 summary. In this unit, communication was discussed first to prepare you for presentation and negotiation. The basic purpose of communication is to develop an understanding with your audience, and in every sales situation, your customer is your audience. The way you as a salesperson communicate with them sets in motion the complete sales process. IGNOU. To summarize the discussion on the structure of presentation, we can say that the first thing in any presentation is the preparation you do in advance. You research the information, club the information under subtopics, subheads, etc., Sequence these subheads appropriately. You identify specifically what you would say in the opening section of your presentation. You decide the core, 1E, the main body, and you also plan your closing remarks. You have not started speaking to your audience, but you have spent considerable time in preparing. In fact, those who overlook this phase, they find it difficult to make a winning presentation. While developing any presentation, you have to progress very systematically. Each of the strategic variables should be considered in as much detail as possible. Knowing your purpose, understanding of audience, development of a message, identification of presentation method, and integration of various media are all important in developing a presentation strategy. In addition, there are 8 golden rules, although sound and simple, but you need long years to fully practice them. Body language is fascinating. You can practice it just about anywhere. If you make a commitment to follow these rules to the extent you can, you have already improved your presentation ability. Finally, negotiation is about bargaining to reach a mutually agreeable outcome. As a party to negotiation, your endeavor should be a win-win outcome for both the sides. All the participants of negotiation must regard each other as equals. If you want to be a good negotiator, patience should be your key characteristic. Always end positively. Remember, neither party will get what they want, but the final deal should be agreeable to both the sides. Thank you